The city was still waking up when Lindsay stepped into the studio. The old wooden floor creaked under her feet, as if the building itself was tired, worn out from sleepless nights and quiet sighs. She paused in front of a blank canvas. There she was again, alone, surrounded by brushes, paint, and ghosts. It was her favorite morning of the week, Wednesday. Hardly anyone stopped by the gallery, her phone rarely buzzed, and she could actually hear herself breathe as she tried unsuccessfully to fill the emptiness that had followed her for 18 years. She took a deep breath and tied her long brown hair into a messy bun, like she always did before painting. She pulled on her paint-stained apron, dipped her brush into crimson red, and froze. Hovering midair. The canvas stared back at her. Just as empty as she felt. What else was there to say that she hadn't already screamed through brushstrokes? At 36, Lindsay had built a respected career. Exhibitions in 5 states. Features in art magazines. Invitations to fairs in Europe. But behind the vibrant colors she painted with, there was always a shadow. A hollow space no canvas could contain, no matter how large. It wasn't the kind of pain that screamed. It just lived there like a hairline fracture in her chest. A quiet echo of a choice she never wanted to make. She got pregnant at 18. Her boyfriend, George, was 19. They were young, reckless, in love, and terrified. She wanted the baby. He hesitated. Her parents freaked out. His parents vanished. The pressure came like a landslide, promises of a bright future that would vanish the moment she had a child in her arms. In the end, she gave in. Lindsay remembered clearly the few seconds she got to hold her baby. His cry. His warmth. The weight of that tiny body etched into her deeper than any brushstroke on canvas. And then, he was gone. They took him away. She cried for weeks. Then stopped. On the outside, at least. Inside, the pain spread like ivy. Quiet. Suffocating. Over time, she learned to smile. To study. To paint. She built a career out of silence, turning sorrow into strokes, regrets into color. Each painting was an attempt to reconnect. A wordless apology in pigment. But no exhibit ever made her feel whole. She painted for him. Always for him. "You're not showing up today either, huh?" she whispered to the canvas, as if his face might magically appear. She opened a drawer and took out a folded photo. The only glimpse she ever had of him, a blurry picture taken by a nurse who'd been moved by her tears. Lindsay kept it like it was holy. He'd be 18 now. Maybe in college. Maybe driving. Maybe he had his father's laugh or her knack for art. Maybe. "Stop it, Lindsay," she muttered, lifting the brush. But before it touched the canvas, her phone buzzed. A message from the gallery curator. Interview confirmed for today at 3 p.m. Journalist is Luke Matheson, from Essence magazine. Wants to hear about your journey and inspiration. Might be good for you. Lindsay rolled her eyes. She wasn't in the mood for interviews. But it was the final week of the exhibit, and whether she liked it or not, she had to play her part. By 2:55 p.m., she had changed into a new top, applied light makeup, and was seated beside one of her favorite pieces, a child with their back turned, standing before a stormy sea. It was the only painting she had never put up for sale. When the gallery door opened, she stood, and there he was. Luke. Tall, with short blonde hair, scruffy beard, rolled-up dress shirt, and tired green eyes. He had the look of someone carrying something heavy inside. Like her. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Lindsay, right?" he said, extending a hand. "Luke Matheson, Essence. Thanks for having me." "Of course." "Welcome," she replied, a subtle tightness in her chest. There was something about him, familiar? No, not him exactly. But the way he looked at things. The interview began formally, questions, answers. But as the minutes passed, their conversation shifted. He wasn't just there to talk technique or influence. He wanted to understand the soul behind the strokes. Your work always seems to speak of something missing. Like something was torn away, he said, eyes fixed on the painting of the child by the sea. Lindsay hesitated. Swallowed hard. Maybe that's exactly it. Absence, she said. It doesn't scream, but it eats at you. You learn to live with it, but it never leaves. Never. Luke simply nodded. He didn't press. He got it. He moved slowly through the gallery, eyes scanning each canvas like he wanted to feel them, not just see. He stopped in front of the child and sea painting and stood there in silence. This one, it got me, he said softly, almost reverently. There's something in it. Like the child's waiting for something that might never come. Lindsay looked from the painting to him. She wanted to give a rehearsed answer, but her throat tightened. So she just nodded. This one's never been for sale, she murmured. I can see why. Luke turned to her. Can I ask you something personal? She raised an eyebrow but gave a faint smile. Haven't you already been doing that since you walked in? He laughed, and she joined in. Fair, he said. It's just, there's a constant ache in your work. Not loud. It's steady. Quiet. Almost like you've made peace with it. Does that make sense? She stood still for a moment. It does. Probably because that's exactly what it is. Does the pain have a name? He asked, voice gentle, almost fragile. She looked away, blinking back the sting in her eyes. Some names we keep to ourselves. Because once spoken, they carry weight. And we're already carrying so much, she said, with a sad smile. Luke studied her. Didn't push. He respected the boundary. Sorry if I crossed a line. No, she said quickly. You were just real. That's rare. He smiled. They walked through the gallery together. Stopped in front of another piece, a fragmented self-portrait in icy tones. Is this you? He asked. It was. Or a part of me that existed when I painted it, she answered. I think we change over time, even when we don't want to. Luke folded his arms, thoughtful. I get that. I used to be someone else too, before my wife passed. Lindsay turned to him, surprised, quietly moved. I'm so sorry. How long has it been? 2 years. Leukemia. It was fast, he said, voice steady, though his eyes glistened slightly. And I've been raising our son. Samuel. He was 16 when she passed. He's 18 now. We're still figuring out how to live with the hole she left. Lindsay's stomach sank, the number 18 thundered in her chest. But she masked it. That must be hard for him. It is. But he's strong. Sensitive. A good kid. Loves music, draws sometimes. Keeps to himself, but hears everything. I know he misses her. I do too. He paused, letting out a soft sigh. But today's one of the first days in a long while I felt lighter. She met his gaze. They were standing closer now, without realizing. Me too, she said. I thought this would be just another interview. Technical stuff, same questions. But you see differently. You listen differently. Maybe because I carry some cracks too. And somehow, we recognize pain in others when we carry our own. Lindsay smiled, eyes soft. Pain, it connects us. More than we'd like sometimes. And yet, he said, pausing, sometimes it's what brings the right people together. A quiet settled between them. No rush. No need to impress or pretend. It was like they were speaking from the truest parts of themselves, something rare. Almost magical. When the interview ended, he stayed a bit longer. They talked about books, old movies, local coffee shops. It felt light, but laced with a rare kind of connection, one that couldn't be explained. Lindsay found herself laughing. So did he. And somehow, they both felt different. Unburdened. It's been a long time since I've talked to someone like this, he admitted as he reached the door. Same here, she whispered. Lindsay, he began, and she looked up. I know this might sound a little out of place, but would you want to meet up sometime? Grab a coffee? Talk without a recorder, without a timer? She hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, but because it had been so long since anyone saw her like that. And it scared her, but also made her feel alive. I'd love that, she replied. He left with a handshake that lingered longer than it needed to. And a look, one of those that don't need words. One that leaves something hanging in the air. After he left, Lindsay turned back to the blank canvas. Walked over. Picked up her brush and for the first time in months, touched paint to canvas without fear. The story was far from over. But in that moment, a new page had just begun. The coffee shop Luke picked was simple, worn wooden tables, potted plants in the windows, and an old record player spinning vintage jazz. Nothing trendy or flashy. Just a place with soul. Lindsay arrived a few minutes early. She tried to play it cool, but nerves buzzed under her skin. It wasn't a date. Not officially. But something inside her knew this coffee wasn't just coffee. It was about to change everything. Luke showed up shortly after, smiling, his eyes warm. He wore a light button-up and jeans, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. A man who, even carrying grief, carried peace. Thought you might bail on me, he said, grinning. And miss the most talked about coffee in town? Not a chance, she replied, trying to sound breezy. But there was a spark in her eyes that gave her away. They sat side by side near the window. The waiter knew Luke and didn't bother with a menu, he was clearly a regular. Luke ordered his usual. Lindsay just smiled and said she trusted his choice. Can I ask you something completely unrelated to painting, he said, after his first sip. As long as it's not my zodiac sign. What is your zodiac sign? She laughed. Pisces. You're officially allowed to judge me. No judgment. Honestly, that checks out, he said, half teasing, half sincere. She raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? What's that supposed to mean? That you feel more than you say. You carry more than you show. And every painting is a letter you wish you could send, but don't know where to send it. Lindsay didn't answer right away. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. You should write novels, not articles. I've thought about it, he said. But I prefer real stories. They're messier, and usually more beautiful. Messy, for sure. Take you, for example, he continued. You've built this incredible career, you've got wild talent and recognition, but there's still something missing. And I don't mean fame. Lindsay looked at him. There was something disarming about how he saw her, like he cut through all the layers and went straight to the part she tried hardest to protect. I had to leave something behind to get here, she said softly, eyes fixed on her coffee. And sometimes, I still don't know if it was worth it. Luke didn't ask what. He just nodded, like he understood that sometimes silence is kinder than curiosity. When Anna died, he said after a beat, I thought I'd never breathe right again. And even now, 2 years later, some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear her in the kitchen. Lindsay's eyes welled slightly. She was the love of your life? Luke paused. She was my anchor for a long time. But we weren't perfect. We argued, we laughed, we tried again. I think that's where real love lives, in the trying again. He took a breath. But the hardest part? Samuel. He was so close to her. Since she passed, he's been closed off. And no matter how hard I try, I feel like I just can't reach him. He's 18, right? Yeah. Just turned 18. Last week, Luke said with a smile. He's amazing. Quiet, smart, huge heart. But there's this heaviness in his eyes. Sometimes I look at him and wonder, how can someone so young seem so old? Lindsay's body tensed. A chill rippled through her. 18 years. Last week. Quiet. Sensitive. Just like she'd imagined her son would be. Everything around her slowed down. A buzzing in her ears. A feeling she couldn't name. "Do you have a photo of him?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Luke pulled out his phone, unlocked it, and showed her a picture: Samuel, sitting on the couch with a book in his lap. Serious expression. A bit of hair falling over his forehead. Lindsay froze. Time stopped. It was like looking in the rearview mirror of her life. The features were unmistakable. George's nose. The curve of his lips. Even the melancholic look in those piercing blue eyes. She knew. Samuel was her son. The baby she held for seconds before they took him away. The child she'd dreamed of, imagined, longed for every day for 18 years. And now, here he was. So close. But how? Luke hadn't noticed the shock in her face, but he saw her glance away and swallow hard. "You okay?" he asked gently. She tried to smile. "Just emotional. He seems like a really special kid." "He is," Luke said. "And I think you'd like him." Lindsay didn't know whether to cry, scream, or run. But one thing was certain: this wasn't coincidence. This was fate. And somehow, in a way she couldn't begin to explain, life was giving her a second chance. A chance to reconnect. Maybe even to repair the unrepairable. But how? She needed time. She needed to breathe. To think. "Luke," she began, steadying her voice. "I'd really love to meet your son." He looked surprised, but smiled. "Really?" "Really," she said, her eyes shining differently now. "Sometimes you just feel like you're supposed to meet someone. And I feel that about him." Luke looked at her for a moment, something soft settling in his gaze. Then he set his cup down and, like opening a drawer that hadn't been touched in years, said, "You know. Samuel's adopted." Lindsay felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She tried to keep her face calm, but her heart pounded in her temples. "Is that so?" He nodded, his smile tinged with memory. "Anna couldn't have kids. We tried everything. Doctors, treatments, prayers, nothing. Then one day, she looked at me and said, 'Maybe our child is already out there waiting for us.'" He paused, eyes misty. "A few months later, we got the call. A newborn. The mother was young. Single. She signed the adoption papers at the hospital. Anna cried like I've never seen her cry when she held Samuel for the first time. It was like she'd found a missing piece of herself. As if that baby had always been hers." Lindsay bit the inside of her lip to stop it from trembling. "He was just a few days old?" "2," Luke nodded. "We picked him up at the hospital. It was the most beautiful day of our lives. And even though he doesn't share our blood, he's the greatest gift we've ever been given." She turned to the window. Outside, life moved on, unaware. But inside her, everything collapsed. The confirmation, what she feared and hoped for all at once, had just been spoken out loud. Samuel was her son. The one she gave up so he could have a better life. The baby she cried for, dreamed of, every single day for 18 years. And now, he had a name. A face. A father of the heart. And a mother who had loved him completely, even without giving birth to him. Lindsay shrank slightly in her seat. Her chest heavy. Emotion swelling, barely contained. She couldn't let it show. "You all right?" Luke asked, eyes full of concern. She drew a deep breath and forced a smile. "I'm okay. Just moved." "That story is beautiful." "Yeah," he said, looking down at his cup. "Though sometimes I wonder if he still feels something's missing. Not from us, exactly. But there's this silence in his eyes that worries me." Lindsay didn't answer. because she knew that silence. It was the same silence that had lived inside her for nearly 2 decades. And now, for the first time, they were closer than either of them could possibly understand. "Let's set something up. I think you two would get along," Luke said. And all Lindsay could do was nod, her heart pounding like a drum. Lindsay stood in front of the mirror for the 3rd time that afternoon. She took a deep breath. Put her hair up, then let it fall again. Tried on earrings, then took them off. Nothing felt right for what was about to happen. Because this wasn't just any dinner. This was the moment she had waited for 18 years. The moment she had painted, cried for, and dreamed about in silence. She was about to see her son. The son who wouldn't recognize her. Who wouldn't know? Who had a different name, a different life, a different story. And yet, it was still him. Samuel. Luke had invited her over for a simple dinner at his house. Nothing fancy, he'd said. Just me, you, and Sam. To him, it was a nice way to introduce her to his son. To her, it was everything. When she arrived, Luke opened the door with a warm smile. "You came," he said, almost relieved. "I told you I would." "I was afraid you'd change your mind," he admitted, quieter now. "I'm really glad you didn't." She smiled gently. But before she could say anything else, a voice called from inside the house. "Dad, the lasagna's almost ready, I just need to." The voice stopped. Lindsay turned toward it. And then, she saw him. Samuel. For a moment, time folded in on itself. There he was, barefoot, in an oversized t-shirt, a dish towel slung over one shoulder. His dark hair was messy, and his bright blue eyes, George's eyes, met hers with quiet curiosity. Still young, with traces of adolescence, but the outline of a man already starting to form. Lindsay felt her legs weaken. She wanted to run to him, hold him tight, say his name out loud and never let go. But instead, she simply smiled. Samuel looked at her, shy but polite. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied, her voice softer than she expected. "You must be Samuel." "Yeah," he said, wiping his hand on his jeans. "And you're Lindsay, right?" She nodded. Inside, every part of her screamed, "I'm your mother," but outwardly, she only extended a hand. He shook it gently. And in that brief touch, something strange flickered through her, an energy, familiar and warm. As if her body recognized him before her mind had permission to say so. "Sam made dinner tonight," Luke added, trying to ease the mood. "Vegetarian lasagna." He wanted to impress. "Well, I'm already impressed and I haven't even tasted it yet," Lindsay said, smiling at the boy. Samuel gave a quiet laugh and disappeared back into the kitchen. Luke led her into the living room. The space was cozy, lived in. Photos on the walls, books stacked in corners, a few small paintings. And in one corner, an easel with a blank canvas. "That his?" she asked, pointing. Luke nodded. "He likes to draw. Paints sometimes, too. Nothing fancy. After Anna passed, he got more withdrawn. I got him the easel, hoping it might help him open up a little." Lindsay stepped closer. A faint sketch had started to emerge, a woman's face, still undefined. Her chest tightened. Samuel returned with plates and silverware. "Table's ready," he said. They all sat down. Dinner conversation was light. Lindsay steered clear of anything too personal. Samuel didn't talk much, but he listened. Carefully. Observantly. Just like her. Every time Luke laughed, every little thing Samuel did, how he tilted his head, furrowed his brow, she held back the flood inside her. He watches like his father. He carries silence like I do. At one point, Luke went to the kitchen to get more water. Lindsay and Samuel were left alone. "You're a really good cook," she said. Thanks. Learned from videos. And kinda had to, he said, glancing down. After my mom died, it was just me and Dad. I didn't want him eating spaghetti every night. Lindsay smiled through the lump in her throat. You miss her, huh? He nodded slowly. Every day. But I don't know. I've always felt like she wasn't completely mine. She froze. What do you mean? I know I was adopted. And Anna was amazing. She loved me like any real mom would. But sometimes, I feel like there's this piece of me missing. Like there's a part of me out there I've never found. Lindsay nearly broke. She wanted to reach across the table, hold his hands, tell him everything. But instead, she looked into his eyes. And somehow, without knowing why, he felt seen. Luke returned, and the moment passed. The night moved forward. When dinner ended, Samuel quietly excused himself and headed to his room. At the door, as she was leaving, Luke smiled. He liked you. I could tell. I liked him too, she said, trying not to let the emotion show. A lot. Think we could do this again? Another dinner, maybe? She nodded. But before she turned to leave, she looked at Luke and asked, Luke, do you think Samuel's ever wanted to find his birth mother? He paused. I don't know. He's never brought it up. And I never pushed. But, knowing his heart? If she ever showed up, I think he'd give her a chance. She was quiet. A storm of feelings churned inside her. But all she could do was smile, eyes full of unshed tears. Thank you for having me tonight, she said. For everything. Luke looked at her, eyes deeper now. He stepped closer. You know, it's been a long time since I felt this. This what? This calm. Like I can just be myself with someone. No armor. No pressure. Lindsay looked away briefly. Everything felt so intense. So wrong and so right at the same time. I feel that way with you too, she said, her voice trembling. Like I'm coming home. They stood in silence. Just looking at each other. The air between them was charged, pulsing with quiet tension. Luke stepped closer. Too close now. She could feel his breath. Smell his cologne. Sense the warmth of his skin. If I'm going too fast, he began. You're not, she interrupted. And then it happened. The kiss. At first, hesitant, like approaching something sacred. Then deep. Intense. A kiss made of unspoken wounds, buried longing, and promises that had never been spoken aloud. He cupped her face gently, as if afraid she might break. And she let herself feel it. For the first time in a long time, she let go. When they pulled back, eyes still closed, they both exhaled and smiled. We're gonna need more dinners, he whispered. Lots, she answered, voice shaking. But inside, Lindsay's heart split between the thrill of something new, and the weight of the secret that could tear it all apart. She smiled, pained, bittersweet. Gave one final nod, then turned and walked out. But once the door closed behind her, the tears came. Her son, the son she thought she'd lost forever, was just inside. So close. And now, she had to figure out how to reach him without breaking everything again. The next morning came cloaked in gray skies, as if the world outside was echoing exactly what Lindsay felt inside. She sat on the floor of her studio, surrounded by scattered brushes and half-finished canvases propped against the walls. Her eyes fixed on the painting before her. The same child standing at the edge of the ocean, only now, for the first time in years, she began painting the face. Samuel's face. Every brushstroke was an attempt to capture the fleeting seconds she'd spent observing him at dinner. The curve of his jaw. The softness in his eyes. His nose a perfect replica of George's. His hands delicate yet steady. and that expression filled with quiet. She knew him without knowing him. As if his soul had lived inside her all these years, which, in a way, it had. But with every stroke came a deeper fear. What would happen if he found out? If Luke learned the truth that she had hidden it? What if Samuel couldn't forgive her? Her hand dropped the brush, letting it fall onto the paint-stained sheet beneath her. She stood and walked to a bookshelf, reaching for an old, yellowed envelope tucked behind paperbacks and sketchpads, a place where she kept the deepest memories she never dared to share with anyone. Inside was the only photo ever taken of her holding her baby, a moment that lasted less than a minute. A letter never sent. And a hospital bracelet with a handwritten tag, "Newborn, Lindsay." She pressed the bracelet against her chest. "I never forgot you." "Never," she whispered. Later that day, she stepped into the gallery's back room, a dim, rarely entered space where she stored her older, more private pieces. Hidden among them was a series of fragmented self-portraits. Just pieces, her face in halves, eyes hidden, lips sealed. Paintings created in the years after giving him up. Art, yes, but also a scream. And a wound. She sat in front of them and let herself cry. For the girl who had to make an impossible choice. For the woman who carried absence like a hidden scar. And for the boy who now had a name, a face, a life. And a father. Luke. Just thinking of him made her skin warm. The kiss from the night before still hummed on her lips like it had just happened. There was tenderness. Passion. Safety. And a kind of surrender she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. But to love Luke meant she couldn't lie to him. And yet, the truth felt like a blade ready to cut everything apart. That afternoon, Lindsay drove downtown and bought a simple black notebook. She had decided to write to Samuel. She didn't know if she'd ever have the courage to give it to him. But she had to say it. She had to put it on paper, the truth her chest could no longer carry alone. "Dear Samuel, you may never read this. These words might stay hidden forever. But there's something you need to know, something that has slept inside me for 18 years and finally woke the moment I looked into your eyes." She wrote for hours. About her youth. The pregnancy. The day at the hospital. The guilt. The silence. The love, how she had loved him long before she even knew his name. How, even from afar, he'd been the center of her world. Later that week, Luke invited her back to the house. Just coffee and cake at sunset, he said it was by Samuel's request. She said yes. This time, she brought a gift. A small painting kit, paints, brushes, and a short note inside. "Art has always saved me. Maybe it'll find you, too." Samuel opened the package quietly. He touched the paints like they were sacred. Then looked at her, a long, steady gaze, filled with something neither of them could name. "Thank you," he said softly. "I've never gotten something like this before." She smiled. And for a moment, something between them shifted. Not recognition. Not yet. But something. A thread. A quiet echo between two souls who'd unknowingly been searching for each other all along. After coffee, Samuel headed to his room, leaving Lindsay and Luke alone in the living room, where a soft instrumental track hummed in the background. She stood to take the empty cups to the kitchen, but he gently reached for her hand. "Stay," he said with an easy smile. "Evenings like this, with good company, are rare. I don't want it to end so soon." She sat back down beside him. They were close, but every gesture between them felt intentional, respectful. As if they were learning to trust the pace and each other. Luke leaned forward, arms resting on his knees, his gaze distant before turning to face her. "Lindsay, can I say something? Might be a little too soon." "Go ahead," she replied, heart already racing. He took a breath. "I'm really enjoying getting to know you." She smiled, caught off guard by the simplicity and weight of those words. "I mean it," he continued. "You're different from anyone I've met in a long time. There's something about you that makes me stop. Listen. Breathe. It's like time slows down when you're near. she lowered her eyes, moved. It's been a while since anyone's seen me like this. Without the artist persona. Without the walls. You don't need walls, he said. There's strength in your vulnerability. A kind of beauty in what you don't say. And look, I don't know where this is going. I'm not in a rush. But I like being with you. A lot. She looked at him, and for a split second, she almost told him everything. The truth. The past. The secret. But before she could speak, he gently raised a hand. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. She nodded. But her eyes spoke volumes. She was falling. And she was terrified. Because deep down, she knew, the deeper he fell for her, the more devastating it would be when the truth came out. Luke noticed the silence that settled between them, but didn't pull away. Instead, he moved a little closer, every movement soft, like someone respecting something sacred. May I? He whispered, barely audible. Lindsay didn't answer with words. She simply lifted her face, letting her eyes speak for her. The kiss was quiet at first. Like two long-lost pieces meeting again. Then deeper, fuller, a kiss woven with stories yet to be told, but already known in the way skin meets skin and silence holds meaning. Luke's hands came to her face, cradling her gently. Lindsay felt her heart beating in her chest like it hadn't in years. The world paused, spinning only around the two of them. It wasn't just desire. It was arrival. It was rest. When they finally parted, their breaths still mingled in the space between them, their eyes stayed closed for a beat longer, like neither of them wanted the moment to end. That was, he murmured. Unexpected, she finished, smiling softly, lips still warm. But very, very right, he said, pressing his forehead gently against hers. And in that moment, Lindsay wished time would stop. Right there, in the quiet living room, the scent of coffee still in the air, and love finally knocking at her door. Even though behind that door, the entire past was about to erupt. On the way home, Lindsay looked up at the darkening sky and paused at the door of her studio. She stepped inside, sat down in front of the canvas, and finally, completed the painting. The boy now had a face. And he faced the sea. A calm sea. As if, somehow, he knew where to return. But even with the painting finished, the emptiness lingered. Because the secret was still hers alone. And with every passing day, it grew heavier. She knew. She couldn't hold on to the truth much longer. The moment to speak was coming. And when it did, she would either rebuild everything, or watch it all fall apart again. Samuel was sitting in the backyard, a sketchpad resting on his lap and his headphones draped around his neck. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the patchy grass. Lindsay approached quietly, holding a cup of hot tea in her hands. I brought you some tea, she said with a soft smile. The breeze feels like fall already. Samuel glanced up at her, hesitated for a moment, then accepted it. Thanks. She sat down beside him, close enough to show she was there, but without intruding on his space. What were you drawing? She asked. He turned the sketchpad around, revealing the beginning of a portrait. It was a woman's face. Soft features. A distant gaze. Still unfinished. That's my mom. Anna, he said. Lindsay felt her chest tighten. She recognized the shape of the eyes, the gentle curves of the face. It was her. The woman who had raised her son. Who had loved him. Who had been the mother she never got to be. She was beautiful, Lindsay said softly. She was, he replied, eyes fixed on the paper. And she had this weird laugh, kind of choked, like she was trying not to spit out her drink. But it was the best laugh in the world. When she laughed, it felt like the whole house lit up. Do you miss her every day? He slowly shook his head. Not every day. Some days, I pretend I don't. I go on autopilot. But then, there are nights when I wake up in the middle of the silence, and it feels like something's missing. Like a piece of me's just gone. Lindsay turned her face away, trying to hide the emotion. "Have you talked about this with your dad?" she asked. "He tries. But I don't want him to feel bad. For not being her. Or for me still being broken. He's lost a lot, too." "You're not broken, Samuel," she said gently. "You're just dealing with pain in your own way." He looked at her, and for a moment, the silence between them felt heavy with meaning, like something in his body recognized the presence beside him. "Sometimes I think about my birth mom," he confessed. "I wonder what she was like. If she was young. If she was scared. If she thinks about me." Lindsay held her breath. "And what do you feel when you think about her?" "Anger, sometimes. But mostly, sadness. I just wanna understand. That's it. I wish someone would just tell me why. Why she left me." She swallowed hard. His face, so close, was a mix of pain and searching. And she wanted so badly to scream, "I didn't leave you. I was left, too." But all she could say was, "Maybe," she thought she was doing what was best. "Maybe," he whispered. But best for who? The question lingered in the air like an open wound. Samuel looked away and closed the sketchpad. "You're the first person who listens without trying to fix anything," he said. "You just listen." "Maybe because I know what it's like to need someone to just hear you," she replied, her voice tender. Then he said something that caught her off guard. "I like being around you, Lindsay. There's something about you that makes me feel lighter. Almost familiar." She smiled, though her eyes were glossy. "I like being around you too, Samuel." She reached out her hand, and he took it. It was the first touch between a mother and her son, two people who didn't know they were mother and son. A touch that carried 1,000 untold stories. But in the quiet of that fading afternoon, it already said everything. Later that night, when she got home, Lindsay locked herself in her studio and pulled down the notebook she'd been writing for Samuel. That evening, she wrote, "Today, I heard you speak of a pain I was never able to heal. You told me about the woman who raised you, and even though she wasn't me, she loved you with her whole soul. Samuel, you said you feel like a part of you is missing. But what you don't know is, that part was missing in me, too. Every single day of my life." She closed the notebook with trembling hands. Each day, the truth became harder to keep. And at the same time, more dangerous to reveal. Because now, it wasn't just about the past. It was about what they were building in the present. And she knew, once that secret came out, nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The room was quiet, bathed in soft light and the faint scent of paint lingering in the air. Luke sat on the small couch next to the bookshelf, a glass of wine in hand. Lindsay was finishing up rinsing her brushes, drying her hands on a paint-streaked towel. "I like this place," he said, glancing around. "Feels like your soul is in every corner." "Sometimes I think I pour so much of myself onto the canvas, there's not much left of me after," she replied, sitting beside him. "Maybe painting is your way of staying alive," he said gently, looking at her with affection. She smiled, eyes tinged with sadness. "That's exactly what it is." Luke went quiet for a moment, then turned toward her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. I talk a lot about Samuel, Anna, my past, but I've noticed you don't really open up about yours. Your family, your life before art. Why is that?" Lindsay took a deep breath. The moment she'd been dreading for days had finally come. She couldn't keep hiding everything forever. But telling the truth? That felt impossible. So she chose the halfway truth. "When I was 18, I got pregnant," she began, voice trembling. Luke looked at her attentively, respectfully. He didn't interrupt. "It was with my boyfriend at the time, George. We were young, reckless. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. My family was conservative, full of rules, and I didn't want to disappoint anyone." She paused. Her chest was already tight. During the pregnancy, I felt completely alone. George stuck around, but he was just as lost. And then, her voice cracked, the baby was born. But he didn't make it. He died during labor. Luke lowered his eyes, silent. He felt the weight of her words. The pain they carried. Lindsay. I had no idea, he said quietly. She forced a small smile, but her eyes were already glassy. No one really knows. Almost no one. It all happened so fast. And it hurt too much. After that, I left home. Threw myself into school, into painting, into anything that kept me from thinking. Luke reached for her hand, holding it firmly, tenderly. You didn't have to share that with me. But I'm grateful you did. She nodded, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. Some mornings, I wake up feeling like someone's missing. Like a part of me got ripped out and is still out there somewhere, or I can't reach it. He gently pulled her into a hug, and she let herself fold into him. His chest was solid, grounding. She cried silently for a few seconds, feeling the grief of the past. And the weight of the lie she had just told. Because she knew he was alive. She knew his name. And she knew he lived with the man now holding her in his arms. But she didn't have the courage to say it. Not yet. Luke ran his hand through her hair slowly. You're an incredible woman. And no matter what's happened, you deserve peace. You deserve love. So much love. She closed her eyes and wished with all her heart that those words were true. But deep down, she knew peace wouldn't come. Not fully. Not until he knew who she really was. Luke still held her close. Lindsay, her face tucked into his chest, felt the world spin a little slower. There, between stained brushes and unfinished canvases, she hung suspended between guilt and comfort. He gently lifted her chin, holding her face in both hands. You're strong. And I admire that. But, you don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me. She met his gaze. Her eyes were wet, but something new flickered in them, surrender. A quiet space where pain and longing met halfway. I don't know who I am when I'm not trying to be strong, she whispered. Then let me help you find out. Without another word, he kissed her. This time, there was no hesitation. It was slow, deep, full of tenderness but also hunger. Hunger to feel. To connect. To belong to something that finally made sense. His hands traced her back carefully, like he was mapping new territory. Hers clung to his shirt, as if afraid he might vanish. Their breath mingled. Words faded. All that remained was touch and silence. He gently guided her to the mattress tucked by the window, where she sometimes crashed after late-night painting sessions. The lights in the studio stayed dim, and outside, the city had disappeared beneath a foggy veil. Lindsay lay on her back, eyes locked on his. And in that moment, there was no past. No fear. No lies. Just the two of them. Between kisses and slow, aching touches, they undressed each other like peeling layers off the soul. Every movement was an apology for everything life had once refused them. Every sigh, a quiet vow of tenderness. They made love right there, among paint and canvas, as if time didn't exist. And for the first time in years, Lindsay felt whole. Even though she knew that night was made of beauty. And of a lie that, one day soon, would have to bleed. The next morning arrived with the weight of an emotional hangover. Lindsay woke tangled in paint-streaked sheets on the studio floor. The scent of Luke's coffee still lingered in the air. He was already gone, but had left a note on the makeshift nightstand beside the mattress. You showed me something I thought I'd never feel again. I'll be back tonight. L. She smiled, fingers wrapped around the note. But it didn't last. The weight on her chest came rushing back the moment she remembered the lie she'd told Luke the night before. Drowning in guilt, she showered and spent the day trying to paint, write, play music, anything to silence the storm inside her head. But the silence was louder than all of it. Around 6 in the evening, the doorbell rang, She wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart jumped at the sound, such an innocent thing, yet it felt like it could tear through decades. She opened the door and froze. George. His hair was thinner now, but not gray. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw. He wore simple, well-kept clothes. His blue eyes held the same restless spark as before, now dulled by guilt and softened by the lines time had carved into his face. There was something broken in him. But it was undeniably still him. "Lindsay," he said, barely above a whisper. "I didn't even know if you still lived here." She swallowed hard. No words came. What are you doing here? I really need to talk to you. I thought about calling, but it had to be in person." She froze. There was nothing they had to talk about except the past. Hesitant, Lindsay opened the door all the way, stepping aside to let George in. He followed her into the living room. "I'm looking for him, Lindsay. Our son." The words hit like a punch to the gut. "What? I know I have no right to show up like this after all this time. But I'm trying to make things right. I know it's late, way too late. But I can't die without at least seeing his face. Knowing he's okay. I've spent 18 years pretending I was at peace. But I'm not. I never was." She leaned back against the couch, trying not to collapse. The world tilted under her feet. "Why now?" George took a deep breath. "Because I dreamt about him. 3 nights in a row. And I don't know, Lindsay, it felt like a sign. I hired a private investigator. He's already got some names, some records. It's just a matter of time before we find something." She felt the stab. Time had run out. George didn't know it, but he was closer to the truth than he'd ever been. And she was about to be swallowed whole by the silence she'd chosen. "You look scared," he said, picking up on her reaction. "It's just," she looked away, "I didn't expect to see you." "I get that. But I have to do this." "No. You don't." He was adopted, George. He grew up with a family. You don't get to show up after 18 years and play dad. Her voice cracked, panic slipping through. "I'm not trying to play anything. I'm just trying to fix what we did." She stared at him, eyes burning. "What you convinced me to do, George. I was just a scared kid. And you said it was the right thing. That it was best. And you agreed," he snapped back, hurt and anger in his voice. "You could have said no. You could have held on. But you didn't. You were scared too." She turned her face, throat tightening. "You have no idea what it was like for me, walking out of that hospital with empty arms. My body full of milk, and no baby to feed. No name to whisper." George lowered his gaze, silence thick with pain. "I think about that every night. I swear to God." Lindsay sank onto the couch, crushed beneath the weight of memory. "I looked for him in every boy I passed on the street. Every time I walked by a school, or saw kids running through a park. I wondered, is that him?" "I did too," George murmured. "That's why I hired someone. I needed you to know." She felt the floor giving way beneath her. The time she thought she still had, it was slipping fast. "You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to ruin his life." "I'm trying to give closure to a story that started wrong," he said. "I'm not that selfish kid anymore. I just want to know who he is. If he's okay. If he hates me. If he wants to meet me. I need that." Lindsay took a long, trembling breath, trying to hold it together. "And what if he doesn't want any of this? Then I'll walk away. I'll respect that. But if he does, I want to be there. Even just for a minute." She swallowed hard. "And why now, George? Why not 10 years ago? Why not when he was little, when he might have needed us?" "Because I was a coward. And now I'm too broken to keep pretending life went on," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Lindsay." I know we did everything wrong. But it's not too late to ask for forgiveness." She said nothing. George stepped forward, unsure. "And you? Don't you want to meet him?" She looked away, the lie scorching her throat. "Of course I do. But I'm scared. What if he doesn't want to meet me? I abandoned him. How could he ever forgive me? We have to try, Lindsay. We've been hiding long enough." He looked at her, long and quiet. "I'll let you know if I find anything." She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the floor, fully aware her world was about to fall apart again. George walked out, quietly closing the door behind him. Lindsay dropped her head into her hands and broke down. The past was no longer a memory. It was at her doorstep. And she was about to lose everything. Whether she told the truth or not. The phone rang for the fourth time. Lindsay stared at it like it was some kind of silent threat. Luke's name flashed on the screen, the same name that, until that morning, used to make her heart race with joy. Now, it raced with fear. She didn't answer. She let the ringtone fade into the heavy silence of the studio. She was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, eyes locked on a blank canvas she couldn't bring herself to paint. The whole world seemed to have lost its color after George's visit. His words still echoed in her mind. "I'm trying to fix what we did. I hired a private investigator. We're going to find something." She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell everything. But that moment had come and gone. And now, all that was left was fear. The phone rang again. She turned it off. 20 minutes later, a soft knock at the door. Lindsay didn't move. The knock came again, firmer this time. "Lindsay?" Luke's voice came through from the other side. "It's me." She closed her eyes. She wished she could disappear. "You didn't answer my calls. I got worried. Are you okay?" She couldn't leave Luke hanging like that. She needed to talk to him even if it was just to send him away. Lindsay slowly made her way to the door, heart tight in her chest. Luke's eyes were filled with concern. His brow furrowed. In his hand, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers, simple but heartfelt. "Lindsay." She looked up at him. Her eyes were red and sunken. Her face pale, streaked with dried tears. "What happened?" "I'm sorry I didn't answer," she said quietly. "I just couldn't." Lindsay stepped back, and Luke followed her inside. "Jesus, you're scaring me," he said. "Why were you crying?" She took her time before replying. "George stopped by earlier." Luke frowned. "George? Your ex?" She nodded. "What did he want?" "To dig up the past." "Why?" "I don't want to talk about it right now." "I can't. Everything's a mess in my head. I can't breathe properly. I can't think straight," she said, gently stepping away. Luke nodded, respectful. "It's okay. I'm here. You don't need to explain anything right now. I just want you to know you're not alone. You don't have to go through this alone." Lindsay looked at him, face wet, heart aching. More than anything, she wanted to fall into his arms and forget the world. But she couldn't. Because she knew what he didn't. I need to be alone," she said softly, like the words were tearing her apart inside. Luke stared at her for a long moment. His eyes held sadness, but also understanding. "Okay," he said quietly. "I get it. Just don't disappear on me again. Please." She nodded. But she didn't promise. Luke stood slowly, reluctantly, like part of him wanted to stay and hold her until she came back to life, and another part knew her space right now was sacred. "I'll come back when you're ready," he said as he reached the door. She looked at him one last time before he left. And in his eyes was a strange kind of light, a mix of pain, fear, and love. When the door closed, Lindsay let herself sink back to the floor. alone again. And for the rest of the night, she stayed there, motionless as the world was swallowed by the dark hours before dawn. It had been 4 days of silence. For long days where Lindsay didn't sleep, didn't paint, didn't answer her phone, didn't write a single word. All she did was sit and stare at the door like somehow Luke would just walk through it. But he didn't. And deep down, she knew why. Because now, it was her turn to show up. After everything George had said, after carrying the weight of so many lies and silences, Lindsay made a choice. She was going to tell the truth. All of it. Even if they ended up hating her. Even if it meant losing everything. Even if it tore her apart from the inside out. On a gray Tuesday evening, she threw on a simple outfit, tied her hair into a messy bun, and drove over to Luke's house. With every step toward his front door, her heart pounded louder like it was echoing in her ears. She rang the doorbell. It took a moment. Then the door opened. Luke stood there, surprised, cautious. There was something different in his eyes now. A wall. A brand new one, built fast and strong. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Hey," he replied, colder than she expected. "Can we talk?" He hesitated for a few seconds, then nodded. "Sure. Come in." Inside, Samuel was on the living room couch, headphones hanging around his neck, eyes sharp and alert. There was something unsettled in him too. Lindsay almost turned around. But she didn't. "Sorry, I didn't call. I needed time to calm down, to get my thoughts straight so I could." She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I need to tell you something. Something important. Something I've been hiding, out of fear. Out of shame. And because I honestly didn't know how to say it without blowing everything up." Luke frowned. "What are you talking about?" She inhaled again. She was just about to say the words "Samuel is my son" when the doorbell rang. Everyone looked toward the door. "Who could that be now?" Luke muttered as he walked over and opened it. And when he did, Lindsay's entire world stopped cold. "George?" Her voice came out as a panicked whisper. Luke turned to her, confused. Then back to the man at the door. "George? Your ex?" he asked, completely thrown. "I'm sorry to drop in like this," George said, stepping forward, his eyes locked on Lindsay with quiet rage. "I was outside, watching, trying to process everything the private investigator told me. And then I saw Lindsay show up, ring the bell, and get welcomed in like an old friend. I had to come find out what the hell is going on." He turned to her, his voice cutting. "You knew. You knew where he was this whole time." "George, not now," Lindsay pleaded, her voice cracking. "What is going on here?" Luke asked, trying to make sense of it. George looked directly at him and pointed to Samuel. "Samuel. He's our son, Luke. The son we gave up for adoption. He's the kid." Lindsay knew. She knew, and she didn't say a damn thing. She lied straight to my face when I told her I was looking for him. The silence that followed was like a bomb going off. Samuel stood, stunned. "What?" Luke went pale. That can't be real." "It's real," George said. "I saw old photos. Compared records. Talked to the detective." Lindsay stepped forward, trying to reach them. "Luke, please, just listen to me." "You knew?" Samuel asked, his voice shaking. "You knew this whole time and didn't say anything?" "I was trying to find the right way to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. You lied." Samuel yelled, backing away like she was dangerous. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she cried, her eyes filling with tears. Luke stepped back too, his eyes dark. "But, you told me your baby died at birth." "I didn't have the courage to say what really happened." He cut her off. "You looked me in the eye, Lindsay. You slept in my bed. You touched my son, and you lied about everything. I loved you," she shouted. I still love you. But I'm his mother. That doesn't just go away. It does, Samuel said sharply. It erases everything. She staggered back, breathless. She was losing them. Both of them. George wasn't done. His voice was cold, biting. You kept my son from me, Lindsay. You knew. And you let me come here like a fool. That's cruel. And then the ground beneath her gave way. Luke stepped toward the door. Opened it slowly. Leave, Lindsay. Luke. Please. She looked at Samuel, hoping for anything. But he turned his face away. Fists clenched. Eyes full of pain. With no other choice, she stepped out into the cold. I'm sorry, was all she could say. The door closed behind her. You had no right to do that, George. You lied, Lindsay, not me. Now deal with it. He turned and walked toward his car across the street. Night had fallen hard. The air was sharp, bitter, unforgiving. And for the first time, Lindsay felt like the entire world had turned its back on her. It had been raining for 3 days straight. Water poured down the sidewalks like it was trying to wash the world clean, but no storm could ever scrub away what had happened. Lindsay hadn't left the house. The lights in the studio stayed off. Half-finished paintings sat forgotten, drying on their own. Her black notebook was closed on the desk. And Lindsay, curled up in bed, still wearing the same clothes from the night she was thrown out, hadn't moved. The pain wasn't just from rejection. It was from losing her son again. But this time, she was fully aware of it. She had found Samuel. She'd heard his laugh, smelled his hair, watched him sleep. She'd touched his soul and then been cast out of it. And the cruelest part? She deserved it. Across town, Luke's house was just as quiet. Samuel stayed locked in his room most of the time. He barely ate. He didn't talk. He just listened to the same songs on repeat or drew obsessively in his sketchbook, broken faces, silhouettes without eyes, mothers without mouths. Luke tried to talk to him. But all Samuel would say was, "Just leave me alone." On the third night, Luke walked into his room anyway. Samuel was sitting on the bed, pale, red-eyed. The sketchbook was open in his lap. "I know you're angry," Luke said gently. "But you can't hold this in forever, son." Samuel didn't respond. He just turned the page and started a new drawing. She shouldn't have lied. "I agree with you," Luke continued. "But she's hurting too." "And that excuses what, exactly?" Samuel asked, still focused on the page. "She saw me. Got to know me. And still hid the truth. What kind of mother does that?" Luke took a breath. "A mother who was scared of losing you again." Samuel paused, then looked up at his father. "And you? Are you mad at her too?" Luke didn't answer right away. "I'm hurt," he admitted. "Because I trusted her. Because I loved her." "Loved her?" Samuel asked, his voice catching. Luke ran a hand through his hair. "I don't even know anymore. All I know is what we had was real. And that's what makes this so hard. I can't pretend it didn't happen. She made me feel something I hadn't felt since Anna died." Samuel closed the sketchbook. "So what now?" "Now," Luke said softly, "we feel it. And see what's left after the storm." George hadn't come back. The detective confirmed that Samuel's adoption by Anna and Luke was fully legal, and that there was nothing to contest. But that didn't matter. The damage wasn't legal. It was emotional. On the fourth night, Lindsay finally got out of bed. She walked into the studio and turned on the lights. She leaned against the window, watching the rain slide down the glass. Then she picked up the black notebook and wrote, "You looked at me with anger, Samuel. With eyes full of hurt. And in you, I saw the boy I left behind. But I also saw the man you became without me. And the hardest part was realizing you would have been incredible whether I was there or not. But I wanted so badly to be there. Even if it was just to watch you sleep. And if one day, even from a distance, you let me love you. I swear I'll never leave you again. She closed the notebook, breathed in deeply, and for the first time in days, she cried silently. Not out of pain, but from missing something that might still be possible. Later that night, Lindsay picked up her phone. For the first time in days, she unlocked the screen. Opened her conversation with Luke, then Samuel. They were both still online. But no words had been exchanged since the night everything shattered. Her hands shook as she typed. To Luke. I don't know if you'll read this. Or if you'll block me. But I need to write this. Because if I don't say it, I'll break. What I did has no excuse. But it does have a story. If you'll let me, I want to tell it piece by piece. And so she began. One message a night. Short. Honest. Each one a fragment of her past. The first was about the pregnancy. The fear. The second, about her parents' pressure, the feeling of being treated like a mistake. The third, the night in the hospital, alone, holding a tiny outfit that was never worn. To Samuel, she was more careful. You don't owe me anything. Not a reply. Not forgiveness. But I owe you everything. I knew it was you the moment I saw you. I recognized you with a pain that tore me in half. And I lied, because I was terrified you'd reject me. And ironically, you did. She didn't wait for replies. She didn't need them. It felt like cleaning a wound, slow, raw, and necessary. One day, she worked up the courage to wrap the painting. It was a portrait of Samuel. Not a literal one, but the essence of him, his eyes, his sadness, his sensitivity. It was one of the most painful and purest things she had ever painted. She included a short note. This is my most honest apology. I saw you before I knew it was you. But I loved you before I ever met you. L. She hired a courier and asked him to leave it at Luke's doorstep. No need for contact. That night, Samuel found the package. Luke watched silently as he brought it inside, cautious and tight-lipped. When he tore off the wrapping, silence fell over the house like a held breath. The painting. Samuel stood frozen in front of it for minutes. It was him and somehow not. More than appearance. It was feeling. It was pain. It was tenderness. It was being seen from the inside out. Luke approached slowly, awestruck. She painted that? Of you? Samuel nodded, eyes glistening. She saw me. In a way no one ever has. He sat on the floor with the portrait in his lap, his hands gently brushing the frame. She's been sending messages, he said quietly. Telling everything. Bit by bit. I don't answer. But I read them. Every night. Before bed. Luke sat beside him in silence. Do you still feel angry? He asked. I do, Samuel said. But I miss her too. Luke stayed quiet for a moment, then spoke gently. Sometimes, life breaks us so badly, only love has the power to piece us back together. Samuel didn't answer. He just sat there, holding the portrait close, like he'd found a lost part of himself. That night, for the first time in days, Samuel texted Lindsay. I got the painting. And the messages. I still don't know what to do with all of it. But, thank you for not giving up. Lindsay read the message in the dark, hands trembling, her face soaked in tears. Maybe there was still hope. This wasn't the end. Just the silence. Before the beginning. It was Sunday. The sky was still gray, but the rain had finally stopped. There was something different in the air, like time itself was holding its breath, waiting for someone to make a choice. Lindsay was standing. for the first time in days. She wore a simple dress, no makeup on her face, the dark circles under her eyes still marked by recent pain. But there was a steadiness in her step. A new calm in her chest. Like someone who knows that even if she gets rejected again, she has to try one more time. She picked up her phone and read Samuel's last message for the 10th time. "I still don't know what to do with all of this. But thank you for not giving up." She smiled through tears. This wasn't a fresh start, not yet. But it was a door left slightly ajar. And sometimes, that's all love needs. At Luke's house, breakfast was set out, but no one ate. Samuel sat lost in thought, staring out the window. The painting still leaned against the living room wall, as if it had always belonged there. Luke watched his son silently. Finally, Samuel sighed. "I want to see her." Luke looked up. "You sure about that?" "No," Samuel answered. "But I want to anyway." Luke smiled softly, like a breath finally released. Lindsay was at the door when the intercom buzzed. It was Luke. With Samuel. She froze. When she opened the door, the world paused for a moment. Samuel stood before her. This time, there was no shock. No anger. No yelling. Just eyes full of questions, and space for answers. She smiled, hesitant, fragile, heavy with guilt and hope. "I don't know where to start," she said. Samuel stepped closer, eyes moist. "You don't have to. You already started by not giving up." She placed her hand on her chest, fighting back tears. He took a step forward, and hugged her. It wasn't a movie-perfect hug. It was tight, messy, a little awkward. But it was real. Lindsay collapsed into his arms, whispering through her sobs. "Forgive me. I've wanted so badly to be your mom from the start. But if you want, I can still be somehow." Samuel whispered back. "Start by trying to be my friend." She laughed through her tears. "I'd love that." Luke watched from the doorway. He couldn't hold back the emotion. Seeing them like this felt like witnessing a miracle that begins after forgiveness. Lindsay looked at him. There was something in her eyes, fear and love. He stepped forward slowly. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "But if you still have anything left here," she pointed to his chest, "I promise I'll never hide anything again." Luke took a deep breath, ran his hand over his face, then through his hair. "I thought about wiping you out of my life. But when I tried, all that was left was emptiness. And I realized you're part of what makes me whole again." Her eyes widened. "Luke." He pulled her gently in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of forgiveness. It was a kiss of choice. He chose to stay. Despite the pain. Despite the scars. Later, the three of them sat together for the first time. No labels. No guarantees. But there was warm tea, shy laughter, and Samuel even joked about how Lindsay's place looked like a messy movie set. She smiled and replied, "It's messy, but there's room for anyone who wants to stay." And there, amid paint, hurt, and new promises, a new story was born. One where love wasn't perfect, but it was honest enough to stay.